Cameras in the classroom. What do you think? Is it a good idea? Well, a lot of parents feel like this will help reduce those high numbers of students with disabilities being restrained and or secluded. However, if that video isn't monitored continuously and your child happens to be nonverbal, will it give you a false sense of security? Because will you know when an incident happens? So there's a variety of issues and questions when we look at the topic of having cameras in classrooms. And I am excited because today we have a guest who is very knowledgeable about the subject. Louis Geigerman is with us today, and he's the founder of the National ARD IEP Advocates. And Louis also has a weekly radio show, and I'll be giving everybody the link for that later in our video. But welcome. If you're here, please let us know. Tell us what state you're watching from. And it would also be great if you can share if your state does allow or your district allow cameras in classrooms. I think it would be great to see a perspective here of our viewers. Also, if you want the show notes, just type in the comments show notes and my IEP bot will deliver those to you. So, Louis, thanks for being here with us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so as a Texan advocate, I mean, Texas got a lot of media attention for a variety of reasons, right, the past few years. But also, this was the first state that passed mandatory cameras in classrooms if a parent or a staff member requests. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the backstory of how this law came about?
Sure. It was a rather arduous journey. Now, of course, I wasn't in it at the very beginning in 2009, but let's take it back to 2009. Now, very good friend of mine and really a person that was certainly a major player in making this happen was a woman by the name of Brigitte Rideau. Brigitte Rideau is a fellow COPA member. Also, many of you were in New Orleans here this last week, and she performed on Saturday night. She's a Grammy Award nominee, a jazz singer, and she's something else. In fact, I even got up on the bandstand and started singing with her. So that was there weren't too many dogs that were howling from it or anything.
Yeah,
so
there was a video camera capturing that.
I think there was a video somewhere. I am trying to I am doing everything I can to eliminate every one of those shots, but yeah. But anyway, Brigitte has a son by the name of Terrence, and Terrence was a victim of abuse at his local school district and up in the Fort Worth area. And he had fingers broken and injuries to his, knee dislocated. It was awful. I mean, he's got a condition where really he can't, he's not ambulatory, and he's, limited verbal ability, and he would be considered a person with multiple challenges. And anyway, there was found that, and one day there was so there was some injuries to his bones, and also where he also is incontinent, and so she found blood in his diaper. And through further investigation, it was determined that it was a staff member that had done that. And I will tell you, the case was adjudicated. But it was very, very clear he was the type of child that couldn't verbalize, his injuries. And so she made it a crusade, and I don't mean that derogatorily. It was actually a crusade that, look, there are students that are so cognitively impaired that are that may be nonverbal, that cannot say, "Hey, mom and dad, I've been hurt." And from that point forward, it became something that she was absolutely. This was a mission for her to do something about it. And so she would tell anybody that she could, and went to the press, and we picked up on it here in the down here in the Houston area, and from that point, of course, in my regular practice down here, Houston and Fort Worth, yeah, it's about 225 miles, so it's a good little jaunt here. But I had over the years cases where there had been children that had been injured at school, either by other students or by staff members, and there wasn't much we could do about it. Where there were limited things that we were able to do about it. For one thing, there weren't any witnesses. There were, because there weren't any witnesses, or the kid was nonverbal, it was difficult for law enforcement to investigate it. I mean, it is a crime. And of course, part of the issue is, in gross negligence or injury issues, of course, the districts aren't really shielded from that, but you have to take these cases to federal court. Why? Because these are issues in Texas because of because of liability issues, and limited liability issues. It's a denial of civil rights. So you have to take that through the federal court. So it's an arduous type of process to do something about. Well, anyway, I had some cases here that there was just like an ongoing scenario of cases, and they were just coming one at a time. I was just getting them one after another, which is horrible. Look, I do a lot of cases in special ed. I do them in 504, but these are the hardest, as I'm sure you can understand, to be confronted with. I mean, they're heart-wrenching. They're absolutely gut-wrenching. I mean, I know they have to be done, but God, I just can't imagine being with Family Protective Services or a cop, and you come across these cases. I mean, I know I couldn't be a cop and do that. It would be just too much, because I'd want to deal with the issue, So makes me madder than hell, when I hear about that stuff. So anyway, so around 2006 or 2007, I became acquainted with a news reporter down here in the Houston area, and we started doing stories on special ed. And they had this particular station hadn't been doing stories previously relating to special education. And we were just seeing a rash, one after another. I mean, between the reporter and myself, and they had the highest response in the special ed stories that we've been doing, and how parents were not being treated as an equal participant. And then on top of it, we start seeing these abuse stories. The interest was incredible, and the station made a commitment that they were going to do stories on special ed. And when we saw a trend, and all what we saw, the reporter and I saw that there was the recurring theme, and that we developed the theme. It was a recurring theme. All of these kids were injured, and there were, they took things to the grand jury, and there was nobody to testify as a witness to these cases because there weren't anybody that could say, hey, this happened, because these kids were in self-contained, low cognition, and nonverbal kids. So the theme that we thought, the connecting piece that we saw, and that the reporter skillfully used in his video stories that he did, was that all the basic theme: no cameras. All of these kids didn't have any cameras, and therefore we saw that as a way to protect the kids. That's when I became acquainted with Ms. Rideau that I mentioned. And so with this collection of stories, we took them to the time to the Texas legislature. This was in 2011. I believe that was right. 2011, or was it 2013? 2011. And the state senator at that time was the chairperson of the Senate Education Committee. And he watched these videos and he was appalled. And from that point, as he was in a powerful position, right? Because he was the head of, this is a state Senate, this is not U.S. Senate. But he was appalled, and he championed, and he brought forth a bill to place cameras in the self-contained special ed classrooms. Okay, so that was in 11. Well, of course, we have parents that came to testify in the hearings. The way it works in government, you have a bill that's, by the way, Texas legislature is kind of different from any other legislature in the country, and that is they meet every 2 years.
Right. I know. I was surprised when I first heard that. It was like, really?
Really? In fact, they're in session right now. Okay. But it's like for 100, and I think it's 140 days. So you've got 140 days to one of the most populous states in the country, right? To get a bill introduced, go through both, do hearings in both chambers. So you may have, now, typically what you do is you have a bill that's introduced in the House and one that's introduced in the Senate, so that they can both kind of merge it into one, so they don't have to go through both of them. Not the way it worked. We had one bill that was authored in the House, in the Senate, which we got through the Senate. Figure out how we got it through the Senate, because the chair was certainly wanted it to happen, and we had testimony. We got it into the House. And we got testimony from parents, and it was gut-wrenching testimony. I mean, parents would tell about these horrible stories. I'm telling you, actually, if any of our listeners here that are watching Facebook Live, you can go back in the archives of the Texas legislature and see those videos. You could see you could see the testimony from 2013, 2015. I hope I've got the timeline right. I think it was 13, 14. Actually, I guess it was 13. It was 2013 that we got it in. That's right, 2013. And you can go back in the archives of 2013, 2015, and see what was actually said. But in 2013, 2013, we got. So understand, it was the bill. This is almost something that a movie could be made from, seriously. In 2013, we got the bill it was introduced the last day it could be introduced, with the possibility of getting it through. So this was to the brink. Got it? All right. The last day. So we got a hearing on it in the Senate, which wouldn't have been a problem because the guy was the chair, right? And we got it sent to the House. And we had hearings in the House. And then what happened is when it goes through the House, after that, it goes to a calendar committee. The calendar committee is what decides what bill will actually make it to the floor to be voted on. Well, it died the old-fashioned way in the calendars. I must tell you, so in 2013, it died. You know, it was like the song, you know, the music died. It was like people were in mourning. Like all these parents that had their children that had been, you know, have received the brunt of you know, being abused, felt that it was hopeless, and they were just, it was just horrible. So it didn't make it through, and it died. So we, after that, what do we do? What do we do?
Then you had to wait, right, to 2015.
Yeah, well, yeah, but there's some important information about that, right? We had to wait till 2015, but what was going to happen? That's where Burgett came in and said, you know, what do we do? What do we do? She came to me, what do we do? I said, well, in the, you know, here, as it is in many states, you want to make something happen, you need a lobbyist. And so what Burgett did is she did a series of benefits on her own nickel, okay? Her own nickel. I emceed a couple of them, right? And we, you know, to tell the story, right? And we raised money. And the interesting thing is, a family friend was a former representative in the House. In fact, he was an education guy, so he knew a lot of these people there, and he was well respected. And he had a practice. He had a you know, a practice, a lobbying practice. Did a lot of work with school districts, and I took it to him. His name is Paul Colbert, and Paul was just terrific about this, and he took it on as something to do. So, I mean, as something that he had to believe in it, and he did. And so we had that. So we hired the lobbyist. That was a key issue. But here's another thing, another development. Remember, I said that the state senator who believed in it, okay, who actually has been mentioned a few times in national politics. His name is Dan Patrick. And Dan Patrick decided to run for lieutenant governor. Now, in the state of Texas, the most powerful person is not the governor of the state. It's really the lieutenant governor of the state. He won the election. And now we had the most powerful person in Texas government that was behind this. And so we all, you know, we had another bill that you know, that was to come up in the 2015 election. I mean, the 2015 session, I should say. And this time we, you know, we had a sponsor. Of course, part of the issue is, look, understand what happened at that time. You had the most conservative. I don't care what anybody's politics are. This is not what this is about. But I will tell you, this was the most conservative legislature since the Civil War. Think about that. Y'all listening to that, think about that for a second. The most conservative legislature since the Civil War. Okay? I mean, a bunch of Tea Party folks and others. Again, I'm not denigrating anybody. I'm just saying, just think about that. So we had a sponsor that actually had two bills, and one of the sponsors crapped out. And so we had one bill to get through. So we went back through the process. We went through we were having difficulty getting hearings on the bill So fortunately, the lieutenant governor was certain this was his, I mean, this wasn't his bill, but this is a bill that was important to him. I had problems getting billed. If you can't get a hearing, it's not going anywhere. It dies. So I was having problem getting hearings in the Senate. So I made a call. Next thing you know, boom, we got a hearing. Almost like the next day. And I mean, it was at the brink of deadlines we had to hit. Got a hearing, got through it. And what was incredible, when we got it in the Senate, there were people that heard the testimony, and Brigette talked about the blood in the diaper. I mean, you can imagine the impact of her testimony to people that were listening to this. I mean, this was so gut-wrenching. There were school police officers that testified. You imagine that? We had school police officers that said, look, we've had abuse cases, but we can't make the case because we don't have evidence. We had a child that testified. I mean, we had the people that we had people that could give credible and really important stories that the legislators would hear. So we get through this testimony, and I think I can't remember if it was the Senate or House. Once again, if you want to see this, it's in the archives of the legislature, and at some point I could pass it on.
Yeah, because I was going to say, if people want to type show notes in the comments, then I can put that as one of the resources in the show notes, so people can go back and see that the videos from the archive.
Yeah, so absolutely, I get you. I can get you that. Now I'll have to remember what part of the hearing was there, but one thing that really struck me, I think it was in the House hearing. So it went to the Senate first and then the House, and there had to be some bill substitutes, and that's where the lobbyists really came through. I was the person that was able to push the buttons when we needed a hearing, and the lieutenant governor was there every time when we needed a hearing, which was, I can't tell you how important that was. And so when we got to the House, this is the thing that really got two things that really got me. In the House hearing, one person said, well, I've heard enough. I mean, I've heard enough. This is gut-wrenching. I want to vote yay right now. Can we suspend this and vote yay now? It went, and what happened was in the House and the Senate, and this is significant for this reason. It went out of the committees unanimous, okay? But particularly it mattered in the House. And it went out of committee unanimously. And the sponsor of the bill was the chair of the Local and Consent Calendar Committee. And what is that? The Local and Consent is for bills that are not considered controversial that come out unanimously. Okay. Had it not gone to that committee and was the regular calendar that goes to the full House or regular House committee, it would have died again because there wasn't enough time in the session to get through that committee. Wow. So the only calendar that we could get that would work was a local and consent. And obviously we got it through local and consent. And then it was the day for it to be heard in the whole, by the local and consent. Well, in the local and consent, you have it read, a bill is read 3 times, okay? But what happens is if you have three people come up and say that we have 3 signatures against this bill, it's dead.
Huh.
So we're watching, as most states do, the whole proceedings from committee to the actual hearings, committee hearings to the actual out in the chambers, they're all on video. They're all archived, so you can see the streaming, etc. So I wasn't there, so I watched everything streaming, and so a guy came up, one of the legislators and representatives in North Texas came up and said, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, we have 3 signatures. Now, what you're supposed to do is if you're going to do that, you're supposed to have a conversation with the sponsor before you do that. That's an unwritten rule. And just for the record, think about it. If you're a local consent calendar chair or you're a calendar chair, that's a pretty powerful position.
Right.
Just remember, if you want to get something through the calendar and you have a bill that you want to come up in another session, you might PO that person off and you might not get it through there. So anyway, so the question was, I was sending text messages to the lobbyist. And I said, Paul, is this thing over? And his quote is, I don't know. So what happened is that there was behind the scenes, and this is actually between the hearings and what went on during this part. The interesting thing is that the sponsor, who was the chair of the local consent calendar, got up and said, "Oh well," and she had to think on her feet real quick. Mr. Speaker, does the Honorable Mr. understand that this particular bill protects children that have been abused? Well, and the Speaker was saying, well, I don't know. I said, and Mr. Chairman, in other words, to shame the guy, to shame him on the record. So there was a break. So next thing you know, there's some conversations. You could see some conversations going up at the podium. Now we're in number 2 reading. And on the second reading, those 3 objections went away. And it passed.
Wow.
It passed. And then it passed, and it was like, I asked the guy, I asked Paul Colbert, the lobbyist, have you ever seen this happen? Oh, maybe once a couple of decades, maybe. I mean, unbelievable. And it was because Sophronia Thompson, that was the representative, Sophronia Thompson. I'm telling you, it's something for a book. I'm serious. Or, movie.
Right.
And then it got through the committee, and then it had to go through a conference committee because there was a difference between the versions. But the conference committee, the view that we were more wanted to have preserved, became the thing that was sent to the governor. The problem was, okay, the rule is if it had, okay, so the end of the session was like May 30th. If it's not either vetoed by the governor or not signed, it's either signed, vetoed, or it just goes ahead and it becomes law if he doesn't do anything. Okay. And we were sweating bullets until June 19th. We thought it was done, but we heard there were people from the other side. Trust me. In the hearings, there was nobody that objected to the legislation. There was nobody speaking in objection. And so we had heard that there were people doing it, which we assumed were the schools that were not pleased with this. And what we wanted were cameras to be placed in self-contained self-contained classrooms with video footage to be stolen. I mean, you made the point that what if, what happens if the video is not being watched, 24/7? That wasn't going to happen because that was going to create a fiscal note, and they weren't going to spend it. They didn't want to have a fiscal note or money to spend on it. So this was basically footage, just active camera and footage. And if there was an incident, at least we had some evidence of it.
Right.
So anyway, that was the bill that came out of there. So it had to be a self-contained room. This had to be children, 50% of the time we're in special ed, so on and so forth. And so we were sweating bullets until June 19th. And the governor didn't sign it. He let it stand. But we found out that it was going to happen. So during this time, we had been in conversations with the lieutenant governor. And we explained what happened. And well, anyway, I can't remember. Was it signed or not? No, actually, I think it was signed, but they didn't have this. No, he did sign it, and there wasn't a signing ceremony. Okay. So after that, there were so many parents, there were so many people that were involved with this. We had the lieutenant governor, we had the lobbyist, we had the person that introduced the bill, we had, which was Sempronian, and we had all the parents that testified, all the people that lobbied. There were parents came out of the woodwork. I mean, they were just terrific. It was the coming together, and it was really showing how powerful parents can be by doing this. Well, one of the people that testified, and her child had been injured, and actually they had video footage of that because it was in a common area that the kid was injured, and she was able to use that to make a case. Anyway, she was a major player in that. We had decided that we were going to have a party. And we had a party at her house, and the lieutenant governor showed, and all the people that were involved in this, and Brigitte Branger Jazz Group there, and the lieutenant governor played a mean guitar, and he jammed with him, which was an incredible evening. But it was like, so anyway, we got it passed, and we thought it was over. Well, it wasn't over because they had an attorney general's. There became an issue, a need for an attorney general's opinion because there was some questions about some of the definitions in the bill. And so we had to go back in 2017 and fix the bill. But the hard work had already been done, and we made it happen. And I'm telling you, it was just an incredible experience, but it really taught us a lot about the good side and bad side of government. That's it.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. And I think what you explained is so important for parents to understand, that a lot of times a bill won't be passed the first time you go out for it, but to be persistent and, like you said, have key people that you have relationships with. Having a lobbyist is, I would guess, almost really critical to make something happen. And I did want to pull up some of the comments that we've been getting from our viewers. Mary is from Michigan, and she said the state allows it, but the district doesn't as far as cameras. And then Guy is here from Maryland, and he said that he's concerned about the use of seclusion and restraints in schools and interested in how cameras might increase accountability. So I wonder, Lou, I don't know if there's been any data collected as far as the amount of incidents of restraint and seclusion decreased once cameras were used in the self-contained rooms?
We don't have the data yet. That's the problem. We don't have the data on that yet. And understand, those cameras were originally designed to be used specifically in the case of an incident.
Right.
It wasn't there to watchdog whether they had seclusion or restraints in the classroom. Now, having said that, really, it could be argued that the camera footage is protected by FERPA.
Right.
So you could perhaps, if you were in we had one case where one of lawyers here during Philpo was able to argue that those cameras should be provided in a request for production in a due process case. But we don't have the data, and that's not data that's being collected for that. The real question is has abuse gone down since then?
Right.
We don't have the data on that either. Part of the problem is that it's not widely known. A parent has to ask for the camera to be installed in the classroom. There's a trigger. So they're not arbitrarily doing it anyway. So the word hasn't gotten out to everybody to do that. And there's also been some pushback, which is part of the fix that we had to do in 2017 in the bill. Remember, of course, it's a specious argument, okay? Because the schools have cameras everywhere you go. They got them in the cafeterias, they got them in the common areas, they got them out in the parking lots. Oh, but you put them in the classroom. Oh, it costs too much money, and and it's got to be audio and video. And so they were saying, oh, the cost. Of course, they didn't have any problem with that, but the others. But the issue is that there has to be a trigger to ask for it. Either a school employee will ask for it, which I don't know that has happened yet. And I don't think will. They may be looking for a job if they did that. Or the parent, as long as they meet the criteria. Well, it's not as widespread yet as we would like, and there needs to be a bigger education effort to do it. So I don't have the data, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I did find an article of kind of frequently asked questions. It's from the Texas Association of School Boards. So I don't know how balanced it is.
Yeah.
But I'll put the link for this in the show notes. So again, if you want to get kind of the highlights of today's show and additional resources that I'll post, just type show notes in the comments and I'll make sure that you get those. And then I was going to show another comment here from a viewer. And we've got Julie here from Idaho. Say, hey, Julie. Tiffany is also from Idaho, and she said that she's watching from Boise. Although cameras can't ensure safety, personally, I am for them, especially in self-contained classrooms that serve students who have limited verbal skills or who are nonverbal. I think it's highly unlikely that cameras would sway placement decisions, but I could be wrong. This possibly has never occurred to me. We had a situation several years ago where a video surfaced on a student's iPad in my son's self-contained classroom. The student had taken a video unbeknownst to the staff, and what I heard in that 11-minute video was aides being disrespectful to students. So I think, she goes on to talk about how they had to hire an attorney. They, decided to change schools. And I think what she was referring to when she was talking about placement decisions is there has been a position paper that came out and let me take down her comment. There was a position statement that came out in 2015 from TASH, where it talked about some of their concerns were maybe by telling parents, if you choose the self-contained classroom, your child will be safer because there's a camera in there, versus working with staff to make sure that services are delivered in general ed rooms. So there are a number of issues And I think what is really helpful is for us to learn from Lou's story about how they were successful in Texas, but also the particulars of how it's going to happen. Like you said, the trigger for Texas is a parent or a staff person has to request it. And so, yeah, that spreading the news so parents understand that. I wonder I wonder if they could insert it, Lou, in the procedural safeguards handout that they use in Texas. Could they put that in there? Not that
I don't think so. Okay, because here's the problem, and it's something I wanted to get into. I don't think so because that's not an IDEA requirement.
Right, that's true.
And so, and that kind of is a bit of the rub. It's the way it is. It's not an idea.
Right.
And okay, so part of the problem is that because it's not part of IDEA, there if the districts don't agree to provide the cameras in there, the only recourse that you have is through the district's grievance process. Yeah, so that's the only thing that's an issue. So we had a problem with that because though that district grievance process can take a while, for to go through all the steps. In the last session of the legislature, what we were able to do is get an expedited hearing. The idea is it goes three or four steps through the district, and then it can go to the commissioner of the TEA to determine whether it gets done or not. Well, we got that added that'll expedite the process to the commissioner.
Right. So Karen's here from California. Christy had a comment and she said that she thinks that there should be cameras in all classrooms. And I know I've heard that from other parents too, not just self-contained special education classrooms, but maybe other classrooms also. Amanda is here and she said, I don't want my daughter growing up thinking it's totally normal and fine to be on camera somewhere basically 24/7. Well, I appreciate the added accountability that cameras bring. I have significant concerns with society moving towards normalizing constant surveillance of everyone everywhere.
Well, I want to respond to that. I mean, I get that. I mean, and I get it, Amanda, that it's sort of like, what's it, 1984, where Big Brother is watching. Right. 1984 is a reality. We're 2019. 1984 happened a long time ago. And you can't go anywhere without being in video surveillance. That's just the nature of the beast. I mean, you've got videos. Hey, we wouldn't have gotten those folks that set off those bombs in Boston had we not had video surveillance of those individuals. But there's a good and a bad. I get it, but the other side of it is if you aren't doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about. And Frank, it's like having the finger in the dike. It's just the way it is. But let me tell you something. There's always a balance between personal rights to privacy, and not, and in this particular case, I think we err on those that are the most vulnerable. And these classrooms that we're talking about are the most vulnerable students that we have. Nonverbal, low cognition. So what do? Do we let things go as they are? I think not. I don't think that's a solution. Regarding, with all due respect, the other listener that was talking about cameras everywhere, that would be great in a perfect world. You'll never get the districts to pay for that, and that will cost a significant amount of money. I don't, it just isn't going to happen. So
Right.
the best thing we can do, and if you do a shotgun for everybody, you'll never get it done. If we want to protect our most vulnerable, this is the way to make it happen.
Well, and Tiffany had a response too. She was saying, if Amanda's daughter could communicate to her if somebody abused her at school, she said, I'm just curious because in Tiffany's case, her son wasn't able to communicate that. So,
Yeah.
like you said, for students that are nonverbal, they're not going to come home and tell you what happened at school that day, right?
Exactly.
And that's part of the concern. And Karen was saying, thinking about it another way, it could also help the teaching staff. There are children that are not accurate about what happens at school, so saying the teacher did something when they really didn't.
Karen, I'm glad you brought that up because really a major selling point on this issue was it not only protected the students, but it also protected the teaching staff. And that has been borne out in several cases. So actually, that was a huge issue that we made clear because it gets to the truth because a picture doesn't lie and it's there all the time.
Right, right. And she also said that she thought it could be helpful for students that are nonverbal. One family I was helping wanted some sort of recording because of its inaccuracy of what happened in class. The school denied this, saying confidentiality. So I don't know if you want to address that too, Lou. I know, different students, sometimes parents want them to, wear a device that will be able to record, but also warn, alert the parent if they've left the school grounds. And the issue of privacy, confidentiality, we hear that pushback a lot, even for parents that just want to go and observe in a classroom. So can you address that?
Of course. Number one, you will not hear me ever encourage parents to surreptitiously place a recording device, any type of recording device, video and other, on a student. Regardless of what the state's laws are. One person, here in Texas, as an example, one person in a conversation needs to know if something is, a meeting is being recorded. Only one party.
Right.
Well, you could make a case that person that you placed that camera on doesn't know, doesn't have the capacity to determine that. But even still, it's still not okay. I am not going. You can get advised by other individuals, but I am not going to sit here and say that is acceptable things to do because in a lot of states there are major problems and potentially criminal issues that could be brought against you for that. So surreptitiously recording, absolutely not. I would strongly advise against it.
And I wonder, since the law has passed in Texas, if parents have requested to see a video and the school has said, well, there's other students in the video, so it's a matter of
They can't do that. They can't. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
Okay, they can't do that because the whole idea, it has to be, again, if there's an incident, you have a right to see that. Now, the issue is these are digital images, so those other students can be X'd out. Now, if that's part of something that it was a group thing and it was just by happenstance that these kids were, in view, there's, like for, like at a concert or something, that's a kind of a different, there are different issues. You all can look up on FERPA on what the rules are, but that rule, that's why they're digital. You could easily factor out those other images.
Right.
So
their
that's
faces
not going to
could be
fly.
blurred. Right. Right. Good. Good. Yeah. Because that's the thing. I mean, like you say, in this day and age, we can blur faces or, block them out.
Right.
So Guy was saying, I don't think that there is a reasonable right to privacy in a public school.
That's right.
I think it's reasonable to have cameras in a public setting. Agreed. We need to protect those who are the most vulnerable.
Well, actually, there was several Supreme Court decisions to that very issue that stated that. And one of the most famous ones said basically there is no expectation of privacy in a public school. And time again in those hearings, that was brought up and said, look, federal law says that. The Supreme Court has said that. There is the only exception would be in areas that you would normally expect privacy, like locker rooms, bathrooms, that kind of thing. And frankly, in the bill, we had to factor out dressing areas from the actual camp. Well, in a way that's unfortunate because that's where some abuse can occur. However, true. They had to have audio capabilities in all areas of the room. So while changing areas were excluded, they have to have audio. And let me talk about the also about the footage. The footage has to be kept. Originally, in the original bill, we were looking at 6 months, and which is a lot of storage. It frankly is. But our rationale was it may take time for a parent to realize that something happened or a kid says something. So it ended up going in the second time. It ended up being 3 months. It ended up being 90 days that the footage is held. Now, that's until it's expunged, unless there was an incident and you flagged it for spoilage so that it wouldn't be eliminated. But you got to be able to do something within 90 days.
So that's the thing, I think, as far as the education for parents, like you were saying, to get the word out that one, the trigger has to happen with the parent or staff requesting it. And two, you need to know that you've got that 90-day time frame. So you don't want that to go, get passed and then your evidence is gone.
Absolutely. It's important. You would need to have what's called a spoilage letter of the evidence. And that just lets them know that you need to protect this for litigation. That should be CC'd to everybody in the planet, superintendent, everybody else, to let them know there's an issue, maintain it.
Right. Well, and before I forget, Lou, I want to bring up your website. So if people want to get in touch with you and learn any more or have you do some work for them. Also, your talk show on Saturdays. Do you want to mention that and tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's not quite as interactive as this is. I mean, where you have people, sending in questions in the show. Basically, I do recorded shows every week. I've been doing some rebroadcasts. We've been doing this since 2015, so we take them out of the archives. It's at cypressradio.org, but we have shows that are podcasted there. You go to cypressradio.org, you go to the on-air link, and then my name, then you'll see all the shows on a variety of topics since 2015. We've had Temple Grandin, if anybody is familiar with this in autism, we've had Temple Grandin on. We've had Stephen Shore. We've had some amazing people, from attorneys to clinicians, on a variety of topics. We've even talked about dysautonomia in POTS, which I find is a particularly interesting area for me. But, it's a very interactive. We've had a point and counterpoint with attorneys talking about various issues regarding the law. It's really pretty interesting stuff. And I found out that I actually might have a skill or two in the radio. But it's fun.
You've got a good voice for radio, so that's great.
It's 10 to 11. It's from 10 to 11 a.m. Central Daylight Time that it's streamed on the internet at cypressradio.org.
And then, like you said, if they go to see the archive, do they go on air and your name again to see the archive?
Yeah, you go to the Cypress Radio site, then go to the on air link, and then you go to scroll to my name, and then I'll have them all out there. But we have people listening all over the country, even sometimes people listening in New Zealand and Australia. But tell your friends about it. I'll tell you, there's more information in there on a variety of topics that are interesting, from neuropsychologists to, gosh, just about everything that you find. And then one thing that I do, I'll take 1 second here. One of my favorite pieces is I do one with the background noise, background sound, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we talk about school districts that are the good, the bad, and the ugly, with the theme. And it's good stuff.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day, because I know things are happening and you're putting out fires as we speak. But I do appreciate you being here. I know, as a fellow COPA member, that Lou is a wonderful resource for a lot of parents. And so I hope that you'll go to his website, and I'll put that up one more time, and you can see some resources there also.
There's one more thing. There's one more thing I add. Is it okay? Every year we do a lecture series here in Houston. So if you have any listeners that are here in the Houston area, one of the big problems are individuals with people in the autism spectrum, high functioning people in the autism spectrum. There's, most of them are either unemployed or underemployed, taking low paying jobs, part-time jobs. And we endowed a lecture at the University of Texas in memory of my son, the Benjamin Geigerman Lecture Series. And we bring people that have actually been able to get work or, and impart how they were able to make things happen. Actually, this year, we have real problems here in the Houston area. We don't have very few major companies that are actually recruiting white-collar type jobs for those individuals. Well, anyway, we're having representatives from J.P. Morgan Chase, SAP, and also Ernst & Young, who have developed programs specifically to recruit, train, and hire individuals in the spectrum to take important, meaningful jobs with their companies. So that's on April 9th here in Houston, and it's we're looking for the business community to come primarily this time, because they need to see the value of hiring these people. So.
Oh, exactly. So I'll make sure I put that date in the show notes, because that will be a great event for parents and, like you said, for business people to go to know the advantages of hiring people that are disabled. So,
well, what I could do is send we'll have it videoed, so I can send you the video link that you could use, so anybody can watch it and use it and show it to them.
Good. Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. But thank you so much. Next week, I'm going to be at an IEP meeting, because, it's the season of IEP meetings. So next week, we won't have a actual live show. Instead, it will be a Facebook watch party, where we'll bring one out of the archives for us to watch. But I want to encourage people to like my Facebook page, which is Visions and Voices Together. So you get notified each Thursday of our live show. And my hope as a parent, a retired teacher, an advocate, is that we can empower parents, help them, support them to become more effective advocates for their children, so their children are happy, safe, and learning every day in the classrooms next to their friends. So I'm Charmaine Tanner. I hope to see you on our next live show. So take care. And thank you again, Lou.
Well, I hope I